Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my 2024 BookTube Prize Finals ranking video. The BookTube Prize was started by Robert Sheard back in 2019 as a place for the literary book community to come together and judge the best in literary fiction and nonfiction published in the US the year before. And so I've been an official judge for a few years, and I judge a few rounds per year. We start back in February with a long list of 48 books per division of fiction and nonfiction, and then through 4 rounds we whittle them down. And now with the finals round, we had 6 finalists in each division to judge, and I was assigned nonfiction. And at the end of September, we submitted our ballots, and now in the beginning of October, Robert has announced all of the winners and runners-ups, and there's a video I'll link down below, and it's all on the website as well. And it's all very exciting. When it comes to the fiction finalists, the 3 medalists I haven't read before. I guess it's not too surprising because of the 6 fiction finalists. I'd only read one of the books before, but now I'll have to think about if I want to get to any of the medalists as well. And for nonfiction, of course, I've read all 6 books in the ballot, and, well, the 3 I voted to advance are the ones that ended up, winning and medaling. So I guess I feel pretty in with the in crowd that way, and overall I had a lot of fun reading these books. And anyway, during the rounds we keep quiet so we don't influence each other's votes, but now that the BookTube Prize and the round is over, I am able and excited to share some brief thoughts about these 6 books. So without further ado, let's get into it. In 6th place I put Eve, How the Female Body Drove 200 Million Years of Human Evolution by Kat Bohannon. And admittedly, this is a bit of it more disappointing to me than I hoped it would be, especially for a book that made it to the finals, and, one I actually personally voted to make it onto the long list at all. I was hoping it would focus more on, actually looking at old primate ancestors and so forth, and how they developed attributes that became part of the human female, reality, and to a certain extent she did, and those were my favorite parts. But she also went on these really long rambles that seemed to have a lot less to do with actual science that could be observed, and just more to do, I don't know, with her own opinions, and there was a lot of sort of snarky vernacular in there. And I feel like it really took away from any point she was trying to make. There was just a lot more that was, pop culture-y about this than I was hoping for. And I went ahead and I actually even found some evolutionary biologists on Goodreads who also didn't like this book as much. So, I'm not an expert, but I feel a little more bolstered by that. And just, overall, I just thought it was a bit too rambly, a bit too of a mess. And one of the things I definitely think took away from it was these long, self-indulgent footnotes that really took me out of the narrative completely. So the sun might be shining on this right now, but not so much me. In 5th place I put We Were Once a Family, a story of love, death, and child removal in America by Roxana Asgharian. In this book, reporter Roxana Asgharian really wants to take the child welfare system in the U.S. to task. She's particularly reporting out of Texas, and she particularly follows the case of, 3 siblings who are adopted out of state to join 3 other siblings who, all 6 are adopted by this one couple who end up in 2018 driving their children off of a cliff and killing them because they're outrunning, allegations of child abuse. It was a really sensational case back in the day, and in that way I feel like it doesn't really fully tell the story that she wants to tell with it, because it's just so outlandish and out there. And I feel like the story that she wants to tell about what welfare does, particularly to poorer families of color, taking their children away from them really easily and not giving these families the support they need, not often giving the children to family members or people they know to take care of them. That's somewhat different, I think, than what happened to these siblings. It felt a little disjointed to me, the thesis, and then the sensationalism of this one case that in a way is really very unusual. And I almost feel like there was one sibling who wasn't adopted by this couple, Dante, who ended up in what's called like the pipeline, first of foster care, then residential treatment, and then treatment prison. And that sort of more, I feel like, systemically explained some of the abuses of the child welfare system and why it should be reformed at the very least, and how there would be better ways to, spend this money and treat these people and try as best we can to keep, families together. But this was very sensational and very easy to read, very tragic, but I felt like, the focus was a little bit disjointed. In fourth place, I put Master, Slave, Husband, Wife, An Epic Journey from Slavery to Freedom by Il-Yan Wu. And this is the biography of William and Ellen Craft. They were an enslaved couple in Georgia, and in the 1840s they made this daring escape toward freedom, where Ellen, who was a light-skinned person, she dressed up as a white man, and her husband was her slave, and so that they went on transit out of the South pretending to be this relationship until they got to the North in freedom. And their intent at that time was to go to Canada, but instead they got sort of embroiled in the abolitionist movement, and particularly the lecture movement, where they helped garner support for the cause of abolition alongside such people as Frederick Douglass by, talking about their stories. And it further, put a rift in a way between the North and the South, but before the Civil War began. And the two of them actually wrote their own memoirs together, which is how the author found out about them. And she was trying to sort of broaden their story. In a lot of ways, I think in the memoir, they didn't talk a lot about their experiences in slavery, and she was trying to, give a little bit more voice to that. And it's an interesting biography, I feel like. I mean, I'm going to talk about it more, I guess, with other biographies on this list, because there's only so much primary information that's available after all that time, and I feel like Wu is a lot more direct than some biographers by saying, like, I imagine it might be like this or that, sort of like when she's talking about specific information, she'd like get as close as she can to what their interiority might be based on all of the evidence around them and just normal human reactions to things. So in that way, in a way, I guess it did keep me a little bit more distant from the characters, because there was like a question of that interior authenticity. But sort of the environs around them were really fascinating to read about. The reminder of the complexities of escaping slavery during that time, and of all the attitudes around it, all the complications that formerly enslaved people like the Crafts had to face. So I'm technically putting this book below the line, but it's one of those 3-4 things where I still feel like this was a really compelling read. But in my personal third place slot, and what also made it to the bronze medal of the BookTube Prize, is The Underworld: Journeys to the Depths of the Ocean by Susan Casey. I'm always excited to give a little bit of due to science books, which I think, like a lot of readers who aren't in the know, it can be a difficult barrier of entry sometimes, but maybe part of the reason this one really stuck with people is like the author's reverence for the subject. I mean, she is a science writer in and of herself, and she has been studying the underworld of, the deep sea for many years before this book came on the market, but like her interaction with it is like, by the time we get to some of these chapters, it's almost spiritual. So there's that aspect, and then also there's just so much that she covers in here, like from the scientific finds of like this like almost alien world that we know so little about, that's right on the planet with us. But she also talks about like the history of shipwrecks. She talks about the history of, exploring the seas, like all the way back to, ancient Greece and Rome. And of course she has to talk about the ways that modern human life has been polluting the waters and adding to, climate change concerns in a whole lot of ways, and basically putting the ecosystem of oceans in danger. I feel like my problems with this book are probably very small. Niggles about, her snarkiness about, how space tourism is more popular, or even the way that, like, for a lot of scientists, sometimes all of this stuff feels like this massive escape, like, human life just isn't worth it because our societies are, so, horrible and damning, and so she's just going to go to underwater where nature is the only thing that matters. But overall, these are very small little niggles, and mostly I was just very fascinated with the things that she was describing, and the history, the human history, and the nautical history that she uncovered. And of course, these scientific research projects are difficult to fund, and a lot of it is kept afloat by like eccentric billionaires and that sort of thing. And I just left this book like Casey, hoping that, there will be more money coming to, find out more about, this very huge part of our planet that is relatively untapped. In second place, I put King, A Life by Jonathan Eig. This actually won first place in the BookTube Prize, and I don't begrudge it that. In fact, I kind of wonder if I should have just done that myself. This is a very impressive biography. I sort of assumed it would be so. And to talk again about biographies, it is technically easier, I guess, to write about King because there are still, people who knew him, who are still alive, who can give primary interviews. And the most important thing about this particular sprawling biography is that Eig had access for the first time ever to some uncovered, FBI formerly classified documents, because the FBI was spying on King, claiming he had communist sympathies, which of course, that was a lie. And in a way, I feel like the most complicated thing about King in here is like, the idea of a biography is to humanize great men. And this biography definitely went into a lot of King's flaws or vulnerabilities, from everything from, his, paternal sexism and, the ways that, of course, Coretta was underappreciated as his wife, but also the vulnerabilities of, his physical and mental health as he was taking on more and more of the mantle of this movement alone. And he knew from very early on that, his life could be in danger from this. But that also leans back into the fact that, a big part of his identity is that he's a great man and that he took on this like messianic mantle, as it were. And the ways and the reasons he did it weren't, because of megalomania, at least not that I could see from the biography. It was because he had this, intense sense of calling that, was probably bolstered a little bit from his, particular cultural and religious upbringing, that he was in the right place in the right time. And he didn't even, fully want to take on this mantle, but it was, the way that history and particular events were unfolding, that he was the person who, was able to, starting with the bus boycotts and going into much further and wider afield activities, take on the monster, as it were, of the systemic racism and classism in America, and then ultimately move a little into the Vietnam War. And so, yeah, it's just kind of fascinating that, throughout all of this, there is still something very mythical about him, even in this book, because that's how he lived his life. That's, what he did as the head of this movement. And we did get into some fascinations about the nonviolent movement, about, how difficult it was to parse it like from a philosophy into actual action. I feel like a lot of the reason he became and the movement became so popular was because of televised violence against protesters. So that violence did, bring it more into the public eye. It's just that, the nonviolent people were, solely victimized. Obviously, as movements get larger, nothing's a monolith, but King always stayed very stalwart to the nonviolent appeal of what he was trying to do, even as he did, open his heart and like he had, relationships and, open, considerations with such people as Malcolm X, because, life is nuanced and people are nuanced. And of course it is very, heartening for me to read deeply about King, because it does seem like, his message is, has been so watered down and simplified since his death, and I feel like, you know, he was stalwart about the nonviolence, but, you know, that didn't mean like, you know, laying down and letting the status quo go on. He wanted the opposite of that, and he wanted people in this country, especially people with power, to face up to the inequalities and what it takes to actually live up to American ideals, or, you know, Christian ideals if you're Christian, or what he takes to be Christian ideals anyway. So it was all very fascinating. I mean, it was basically, it was a tour de force, and I think it is a very worthy winner of the 2024 BookTube Prize. But to end with what I did put as #1 for the BookTube Prize finals, I put How to Save Babylon, a memoir by Safia Sinclair, which took the silver medal, you know, overall in the prize. And the truth is, I haven't read this book for a while. I haven't read it since I was reading for the Octafinal several months ago. It stuck with me because of the beautiful poetry in the writing. Safia Sinclair is a poet. In fact, I did see her more recently at the National Book Festival, and she was reading the section where she talked about her mother cutting off her locks of hair, which was a show of defiance, I guess, against her father and his strictures. But, you know, it also, you know, was a challenge for her to give up something that had been so integral to her, and the writing was so musical that I was watching and listening to people react around me. So I was reminded of the power of her writing. I do feel like, you know, in this book, she talks about growing up in a strict Rastafarian family, or her father took on some of the precepts of Rastafarian culture. They lived somewhat separate in Jamaica because the Rastafari are somewhat ostracized. And it's a lot about her trying to find her own voice versus like the intensity of her father's vision about like who they should be. And so I thought that part was pretty powerful, and I also thought it wasn't like completely black and white, like good guys versus bad guys, as Safia tried to find her own voice and navigate like a new path, but not like give up everything about her family either. So just in terms of a Bildungsroman, which this generally was, of somebody who had a very unusual upbringing, it was, you know, very intriguing to get, you know, eyes on that upbringing and more of an understanding of this culture. But I also feel like there was a lot of nuance in what she was portraying, and also the beautiful writing. And I feel like this book would speak to a lot of people, especially my fellow fiction readers who nudge into, you know, nonfiction through memoirs. And that about covers it for me now. You can find Goodreads links for all of the reviews I wrote of these books listed down below now that I'm officially able to post them. And in my next video, which I hope should come out imminently, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the rest of my September reading. There wasn't much. I mostly focused on the BookTube Prize, but stay tuned for that. And yeah, I hope everyone else enjoyed the 2024 BookTube Prize as much as I did. I am so thankful, as always, to Robert for the sheer amount of patience and diligence and planning it takes to put all of this together. We had hundreds of judges across, you know, dozens of different countries. It's just been amazing. I am very much looking forward to next year as well, and in that vein, I'll leave down a link to a judge sign-up video for 2025 in case you'd like to join us. It's been a great experience for me to expand my reading. And yeah, looking forward to seeing what my fellow judges are posting about these books as well. And I'm glad to be literary comrades in arms with you, and hoping to see you again next year. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.